est une solution qui a ses preuves et qui est rentable. Chris Nicoy n'avait-il pas dit dans son discours, la fortification n'est pas une solution miracle ou une stratégie autonome, mais c'est une stratégie de la boîte d'outils qui présente de nombreux avantages. Nous avons aussi entendu parler dans cette séance de bonnes pratiques et d'exemples de fortification. La biofortification a été citée comme exemple où des interventions sont réalisées. Le cadre de l'Union africaine prévoit d'investir dans des projets qui produisent, traitent, emballent et distribuent des aliments fortifiés, ainsi que d'intégrer des semences fortifiées dans le projet des agricultures. La troisième séance, divisée en 3 séances, était consacrée à l'état des lieux de l'enrichissement des aliments en Afrique, avec une partie dédiée à la cartographie, tendances, défis et opportunités, et 2 parties consacrées au partage d'expériences et bonnes pratiques des pays. Pour résoudre le problème de manque de données sur les carences en micronutriments, il a été proposé la combinaison de ressources de données ou l'utilisation de l'intelligence artificielle et d'autres technologies intelligentes. Il a été aussi rappelé l'importance de traiter les carences en micronutriments dans un contexte plus large des régimes alimentaires pauvres et de les aborder dans le cadre d'une approche multisectorielle intégrée, avec des interventions en matière de santé, d'environnement, afin de s'attaquer aux causes sous-jacentes. 7 pays du continent, Nigeria, RD Congo, Burundi, Côte d'Ivoire, Tchad, Ghana et Sénégal, ont partagé leur expérience avec l'audience. Les différentes expériences ont chacune sa particularité, mais il y a un certain nombre de points communs. Les carences en micronutriments les plus répandues sont le fer, la vitamine A et l'iode. Elles constituent une préoccupation majeure de santé publique quant à leur impact direct ou indirect sur la forte mortalité infantile, infanto-juvénile et maternelle. Tous les pays cités ont réussi leur expérience de l'odisation du sel comme première entrée dans l'industrie de fortification. Tous les pays ont des législations plus ou moins élaborées sur l'enrichissement des aliments, mais ils ont tous souligné que la mise en œuvre des règlements manquait. La dernière séance était sur l'initiative promoteuse sur l'enrichissement à promouvoir. Leçons apprises, résultats et impact. 5 experts ont abordé certains défis, opportunités autour de l'enrichissement d'aliments. La biofortification des cultures de base a été passée en revue comme alternative de la fortification industrielle. Il faudrait noter aussi que le cadre de l'Union africaine prévoit investir dans des projets dans ce domaine. Il était recommandé aussi des stratégies de production communautaire et des expériences de partenariat féminin comme exemple de chemin à suivre. Les intervenants ont fait une série de recommandations dans cette séance. La multisectorialité, partenariat, la complémentarité entre les agences sont importantes. Il faut l'implication et engagement des structures étatiques et secteurs privés. Plaidoyer pour l'enrichissement des aliments à travers les plateformes locales de biofortification, les systèmes SUR et les champions de la nutrition, par exemple. Promotion et mise à l'échelle de la fortification par le biais de projets financés par des donateurs qui préconisent une agriculture sensible à la nutrition. Engagement politique au niveau du gouvernement, y compris la mise en œuvre des réglementations sur la fortification. La structuration des organisations paysannes pour un transfert de connaissances à moindre coût. Le temps n'a pas permis d'étaler sur les questions et réponses, mais les participants ont posé beaucoup de questions intéressantes postées sur le chat qui ont été soumises aux présentateurs qui vont fournir les réponses à compléter et à mettre dans le rapport final. Je note à titre d'exemple une question qui a été posée par plus d'un participant sur le bouillon cube largement utilisé en Afrique, surtout en Afrique de l'Ouest. Représente-t-elle une opportunité pour véhiculer et généraliser l'usage des micronutriments, ou plutôt elle représente un danger de santé publique? La réponse donnée était que sans études sérieuses et statistiques fiables, on ne peut pencher dans un sens ou dans un autre. La longue journée d'hier s'est achevée à 18h30. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Osama, pour ce rendu très fidèle des travaux de la journée d'hier. Merci beaucoup. Et vraiment, ceux qui n'étaient pas là hier ou ceux qui rejoignent ce matin sont un peu comme plongés dans les débats qu'il y a eu hier. Nous allons passer maintenant à la session 5. The next session will be the session 5 on rice fortification initiatives. This session will be moderated by Dr. Yan Xia. And Dr. Yan Xia is a South-South specialist at the Center of Excellence in China. Dr. Xia, you have the floor.
Bonjour. Good morning, moderator. Morning, colleagues and friends. My name is Jia Yan. I'm with WP China Center of Excellence for Rural Transformation. It's my great pleasure to facilitate this session, session 5, after yesterday's fruitful discussion. I trust today we're going to have another fruitful discussion and all the more learning opportunities for all of us. Without further ado, I'd like to give you an overview of the structure for the session 5. Today, we're going to have first an overview on rice fortification initiatives brought by Mr. Panjani Kabula, who's the Global Fortification Program Manager from GAIN, followed by another presentation shared by Dr. Corinne Rocots from WP. Her topic will be on WP's recommendable technology standards and quality assurance experience. And she is going to share with us the procedures and tools on WP initiatives on food fortification. And our third presentation this morning will be brought by Bühler colleagues. It's going to be a joint presentation by Mr. Abdel Majid Tuzani, Managing Director of West African from Bühler, followed by a short video from Bühler about rice fortification process. And we're going to hear another colleague from Bühler, Mr. Tom Gao, who's the team leader on One Belt and One Road from Bühler. I believe the three presentations will give us an eye-open journey on how fortified rice initiatives was brought up into market, and how private sector, along with public sectors, and of course, WP's support and interventions in this market initiative. Each speaker is supposed to have 7 to 8 minutes to present your point of views and insights. Follow that, we're going to have a Q&A session, which is going to be around 20 minutes. And I suppose each speaker will have 2 rounds of opportunities to answer questions, either from the floor or we'll bring some questions to go along with the presentations. That's the overview of the structure for the session 5. Without further ado, let me invite our first speaker, Mr. Panjani Kabula. Mr. Panjani, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I will just share my screen now. So it's good to be back among several friends within the nutrition community within Africa and beyond. I was asked to give a high-level overview about, rice fortification, why we need it, what's the current status of rice fortification globally, and what are some of the things that we need to do to scale up rice fortification, either globally, but also within the context of Africa. So my presentation is more high-level, but my colleagues are going to go into a lot of the technical detail. So, our point of departure is we live in a world where approximately 3 billion people cannot afford, a healthy diet. And what do I mean by that? It is a diet that's diverse, that includes cereals, legumes, fruit and vegetables, dairy products, fish, and other animal source foods. So that's what is called a healthy diet. But the reality is, if you look at this, map, the countries that are marked in dark, if people in those countries were to purchase what's a healthy diet, then a large proportion of their income or their household food income is going to go towards this, and they can't afford it. So effectively, what happens is, people default to staple foods. So they're consuming diets that are rich in cereals and other starchy foods. So we're talking about foods such as wheat, maize, rice, cassava, yams, and products like those that are generally very affordable, generally very available, and they're a very good source of calories, but they're a very poor source of micronutrients. But that is what they can afford. And if you look at, the case of micronutrient deficiencies globally, at least 2 billion people suffer from micronutrient deficiencies. And these people predominantly live in Africa and Asia. If we zero in on rice as one of those staple foods that people are consuming, then approximately 3 billion people globally, eat rice every day as their major staple food. And these people predominantly live in Africa and Asia. So, the 90% of all the rice globally is produced in Asia. And the 2 biggest rice consuming regions are Asia and Africa. So if you look at this year, for example, the total production of rice is projected at 508 million tons of rice between 2021 and 2022. But consumption is around 514 million tons of rice, a year. There is a bit of a disconnect between the production figures and consumption figures, but doesn't mean that there's a shortage because there is carryover stocks from previous years. There's not a shortage of rice per se, but that gives you the context that rice is a key staple. A lot of people are consuming rice, but then rice, while good for energy and calories, is a very poor source of micronutrients. So given the context where, healthy diets are not available to 3 billion people globally, given the context where people are consuming a lot of staple foods and rice being one of them, and given the context where, rice is a major staple, and the second biggest consuming region is Africa. what is it that we can do to improve the content of rice? And it goes without saying that over the years, a lot of fortification efforts are focused on cereals such as wheat, wheat and maize, and other products, like edible oils. But rice is a missing opportunity. And so it goes without saying that given rice is a product that's consumed in these large volumes, it provides an opportunity to be fortified and for people to be able to increase their intake of micronutrients. And the momentum is growing. Over the years, the technologies have improved. Back in the day, it used to be that if you wanted to fortify rice, all you needed to do was what was called dusting. So mixing a powder of vitamins and minerals and rice. But we know people wash, their rice, and therefore they throw away the vitamins and minerals. But new technologies have now been developed, which makes fortification easier, and my colleagues are going to talk about that. There's also been a wide body of work and research on efficacy, on consumer acceptance, and that culminated in 2018 when WHO produced a guideline on rice fortification as a strategy for public health, and specifically recommending, 3 micronutrients, particularly that's iron, folic acid, and vitamin A. So what's the status of global fortification on grains globally? So if you look at the map on the left, at least 86 countries mandate fortification of wheat, maize, or rice. So that's one or more of those products. So by law, you have to fortify with various vitamins and minerals. But if you look at the map on the right, rice is still in its infancy because only 7 countries globally mandate fortification of rice. And those countries are predominantly in Latin America and in Asia. To my knowledge, no country in Africa at present has mandatory legislation on rice. So Africa and rice generally is lagging behind. If you look at this actual data, and that's from 2020, from a report from the Food Fortification Initiative, what this does is it looks at, globally, what's the total of industrial milled grains? And by industrial milled, I mean grains that have been milled in large-scale fortification, in large-scale industrial plants. So it doesn't include small-scale facilities. So as at the end of 2020, at least 568 million tons of grains across those 3 food vehicles were milled. 111 million tons of them, were fortified, and that only represents 20% of all industrial milled grains in 2020. So there's still a long way to go. But what is interesting is that, at least 32% of that is maize and wheat. But if you look at rice, only 1% of rice globally is fortified. So rice has got a long way to go before it is fortified and fortified at scale. This map just gives you an overview of where some of those initiatives are globally. You will see predominantly those initiatives are in Central and Latin America. There's a growing initiatives within Asia, and some work that's now being done in West Africa, particularly in Senegal, in Cote d'Ivoire. There's work that's beginning in Nigeria now, and there is a small scale fortified rice kernel producing plant in Mali. But all this to say is rice fortification in Africa is still in infancy, but some initiatives have begun and are on their way, particularly in the West African region. So given that context, what is it that we can do to scale up rice fortification in Africa? There's 3 key main areas where we should focus our efforts on. One is around policy and enabling environment. So, we need to look at how much rice is being consumed in various regions in Africa. And if consumption is at least 75 grams per person per day, it makes sense that rice in those contexts should be fortified, which I must hasten to add, that consumption level covers most of West Africa region. Increasingly also industry is becoming consolidated and centralized, so that makes it a perfect opportunity to be able to fortify rice. But most importantly, what we need is standards. If industry are to fortify, they need to know what micronutrients they should fortify with, what are the levels that they need to add into the production. And so governments need to make sure that they put standards, whether voluntary or mandatory, in place, although mandatory is normally the preferred option if it is a public health intervention. But also need to look at the bigger picture here. It's not about imports, it's not about domestically produced product, it's about both. And that takes into account that there's a lot of countries in Africa where rice is predominantly imported from Asia, from countries like India, Vietnam, Thailand, Pakistan. But it's also, a growing initiative around improving local production. And I think if we are to fortify rice and to reach the larger population, we should be looking at both. The others is to make sure that, having had the policy environment, having had the legislation or standards in place, there is an enabling environment for industry to be able to do this. What is it that the industry are going to need? There's need to be strong partnerships between governments and industry, just like in any fortification program to scale up rice fortification. We also need to do more around what is the cost of rice fortification. So at present, for example, if you look at wheat fortification, it does cost between $4 and $5, a ton to fortify rice, to fortify wheat flour. That's less than 1% of the retail price. For rice, because we still need to scale up, it can vary between 1% to 4% of the retail price of rice. So we need to build economies of scale to be able to drive down the cost of fortified rice. But also in countries where there is taxes on fortified rice kernels that are used for rice fortification, it doesn't make sense because this is a public health intervention. So we need to make sure that rice fortification is affordable, we increase the scale, and therefore we reduce the cost of fortified rice. We also need to make sure that there's access to fortified rice kernels. And this is not just about each country having its own production facility, because in some contexts that may not make sense from a cost perspective. We need to also look at, is there a case for having regional fortified rice kernel production facilities? So the issue should be what's, ensuring there is easy access, but also affordable access. But more and more, we also need to ensure that there is investment in centralized, large-scale rice production, because it is at that context, at that level, that will be able to fortify rice. And in time, when it is mandatory in some countries, there should be level playing field, and that means governments monitoring and enforcing, just like it is with any fortification program. In terms of being able to take it to the market, we should take a holistic approach. And that's making sure that rice is available on the commercial market. There's deliberate policies by governments on public procurement, whether it's for schools, hospitals, and other government institutions, but also integrating rice in social safety net programs that are targeting people that are vulnerable to malnutrition generally. So to sum up, what is it that we're doing as GAIN, towards this initiative globally and specifically in Africa? So we started some of work in Africa back in 2016, and that was looking at what are the supply chains for rice in Africa. We looked at 19 countries and shortlisted 12 as countries where rice fortification would have a very high impact. These are countries that are predominantly in West Africa, but there are also countries in other African regions, for example, Gabon in Central Africa, Djibouti in the Horn of Africa, Comoros, Madagascar, and Mauritius in the Southern Africa region, and Egypt in North Africa. So all those are countries where rice fortification could be scaled up, and we could reach approximately 130 million people or so with fortified rice. Also through an initiative that we support called Smarter Futures, we brought together various NGOs, agencies, and UN agencies that are active in fortification to agree some common approaches towards scaling up rice fortification in Africa. And that includes, harmonized work on standards, work on landscape assessments for industry, and also costing for rice fortification. Some of those initiatives are up and running in countries like Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire. Alongside WFP, we also put together a handbook on the production of fortified rice kernels. So, what is it that you should do to do that? And we're now using that to go ahead and pre-qualify and do a supply assurance programs of fortified rice kernel producers. So as some of you know, at GAIN, we have what we call the GAIN Premix Facility, which is a platform where we audit and assess and pre-qualify producers of various vitamin and mineral premixes. That list of suppliers is available on our website globally, and it's used by a number of agencies, including UN agencies, NGOs, governments, and industry, for their own rice, for their own premix procurement. So that work is ongoing, and we've now gone ahead and started, work around supply assurance of quality assured fortified rice kernel producers. And finally, we're also beginning some work on an enabling environment for rice fortification in Nigeria, alongside WFP and other other agencies in Nigeria. So that's all that I had for you. But that's to say that rice is a major staple. It's a big opportunity for fortification. Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, and specifically West Africa, is a big rice consuming region, and there is need to have an enabling environment, policies, and industry uptake on rice fortification. So I will stop there and hand over back to Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Kabola. Thank you so much for sharing with us an overview of GAIN initiatives, including your rollout and large-scale perspectives to have more fortified rice, especially for Africa. We do appreciate that the 3 dimensions or entry points you proposed for upscaled rice fortification initiative, policy environment, enabling policy environment, industrial drive, and delivery model. I think these are very insightful and enlightening for our audience and all the colleagues. And later, we will try to gather questions for you from the chat box after another 2 presentations. Thank you, Kabola. And next, may I have the pleasure to invite our colleague from WP, the nutrition advisor on WP initiatives in rice fortification. Dr. Karen Rogots will share with us her presentation about WP's initiatives of technology standards and quality assurance mechanism on fortified rice. Dr. Karen, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. I will just wait for somebody to project my slides. Perfect. Okay. Good morning, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Corinne Ringholz, and I am the Food Fortification Advisor for WFP's Nutrition Division. I've been asked to speak on technologies, standards, and quality assurance for fortified rice, which I must admit I usually leave to our food technology experts, but I will do my best to provide a quick overview on these topics and how we support these efforts here at WFP. Next slide, please. Our work on scaling up rice fortification spans the spectrum of advocacy and formative research to supporting local private sector to bring fortified rice to the open market. When introducing or scaling up fortified rice, it's critical to consider all parts of this process. But for the purposes of today, we'll focus on production, standards, and quality assurance. Next slide, please. When we discuss post-harvest rice fortification, there are 3 main types of technology that are used: dusting, coating, and extrusion. At WFP, we are essentially technology agnostic, but given the practice of washing or rinsing rice, sometimes multiple times, in many of the countries where we work, we do not accept or distribute rice that is fortified by dusting technology. Rather, we require that the fortified rice we use is composed of fortified rice kernels that are produced either through rinse-resistant coating or extrusion. In the first case, coated fortified kernels are produced by adding a liquid fortificant mix that adds the micronutrients that are fixed to the rice grains through waxes or gums, usually in a large coating drum, like the one you see here, or other coating machines. Extrusion, on the other hand, uses broken rice or rice flour in combination with a micronutrient powder to create a sort of dough, which is passed through the extruder so as to create a fortified kernel that ideally appears very similar to the original rice grain. In both of these cases, these fortified rice kernels are then blended with the standard unfortified rice, usually in a 1:100 ratio, but that can vary according to the variety and amount of micronutrients in the fortified kernels to create the final fortified rice product. WFP supports the production of this fortified rice through a variety of mechanisms, including providing technical support and advice to local blenders who may be interested in producing fortified rice, and through convening and supporting multi-stakeholder platforms through bodies such as the Sun Business Network to bring together various actors who are essential to creating local production and blending facilities. In the past year, we've worked to identify local blenders who are already ready to create this fortified rice in Senegal, Cameroon, Madagascar, and more, so that they can support the production and scale up of rice across these regions. Next slide, please. The second topic I've been asked to address is how we support standard setting, or how to specify the required quality of the fortified rice and which micronutrients at what level that is included in a country or region's requirements. To note, while the World Health Organization has developed guidance on the use of fortified rice as a public health intervention, as Pinjani just mentioned, neither them nor Codex Alimentarius have set forth recommended levels for micronutrients. So this decision is ultimately left to national and/or regional bodies, and we will discuss why momentarily. Unfortunately, this process is not quite as straightforward as determining the micronutrient gaps in the diet and then using a single fortified staple food to fill those gaps. Though, of course, an understanding of these levels of micronutrient deficiencies and the nutrient composition of the local diet is an essential first step in setting these standards. You can see here, for example, how we could help make school meals programs more nutritious by using fortified rice that matches the WFP specifications, just as one example. Instead, when considering the required micronutrient content for fortified rice, there are a number of conditions that we need to consider for any given country or regional body. Namely, what are the consumption levels of the rice in the target population? So you can assume, for example, that if average consumption is higher, lower levels of micronutrients would be acceptable. Next, you need to consider what other foods are fortified with which micronutrients and whether there are any additional micronutrient supplementation activities that should be factored in, such as vitamin A or iron supplementation. Next, we take into account any anti-nutrients in the food or the broader diet that may inhibit the bioavailability or the absorption of the micronutrients that are added. And finally, we focus on the consumer acceptability of any given combination of micronutrients and specific types of rice, ensuring that the resulting fortified rice is similar in taste, appearance, etc., as the unfortified rice, and importantly, that people will eat and enjoy it. WFP supports governments throughout the world in the development of these standards, carry out the required research, such as, if, for example, in West Africa, we had this recent cost-benefit analysis for Ivory Coast, which was informed by an earlier completed rice industry milling assessment, where we partnered with Nutrition International to describe the impact of a number of scenarios, including the inclusion of various micronutrients for a national standard that would best meet the needs of this population. Next slide, please. Finally, I'd like to touch on a few parameters worth considering when thinking about quality control and quality assurance for fortified rice. Before going too far, I'd like to give a quick definition of some of the key phrases, just to make sure we're all on the same page and have a shared understanding of why this is so very important and should be factored in from the very beginning of considering any fortified rice program. When we talk about quality control, QC, and quality assurance, QA, we're referring to objective techniques, checks, and assessments that are used to document compliance and uniformity of the product within established technical standards, as well as the implementation of planned and systematic activities necessary to ensure that the products or services meet very clear quality standards. I'm sure you can all imagine why these measures are critical to fortified rice production, both in terms of ensuring that the production lines are set up in a way that they are safe and are producing what they're supposed to be producing, as well as to prevent and control fraud or the sale and distribution of food that is supposed to be fortified but does not have the proper level of fortificants. WFP again supports governments and local private sector on all aspects of designing and implementing these monitoring systems. In Bangladesh, we've helped to stand up 2 national laboratories that can test for all of the required micronutrients that are supposed to be present in both the fortified rice kernels and the final fortified rice product. In India, we've provided technical assistance to local blenders to enable them to be able to undertake the internal controls and monitoring of the fortified rice regularly sampled from their blending lines. And globally, as Anjani just mentioned, we developed the Handbook for the production of extruded fortified rice kernels, which provides guidance for anybody who's interested in learning more for how to set up extrusion lines, as well as answers key questions related to extruded fortified rice kernels. So while this talk has focused on some of the more technical issues, again, I just want to flag and emphasize that all of the policy, advocacy, SBCC, formative research, demand generation activities are equally, if not even more important in scaling up a fortified rice program in any given country or region. And also just to put in a little plug that WFP remains a ready and willing partner to help introduce and scale up fortified rice wherever there is demand and opportunity. So I guess next slide. Thank you very much and look forward to the discussion in a bit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Corinne. Thank you for sharing with us the overview of WP's guidance and the developed handbook on fortified rice technology standard and especially on quality assurance. So we appreciate the few indicators or indexes you have mentioned about whether fortified rice would be more acceptable in market while linking with WP's school feeding program in many other countries. And the efforts of WP in supporting country governments and working with local blenders are really impressive. Thank you so much, Dr. Corinne. And our next presentation will be jointly done by Mr. Abdelmajid Touzani, the Managing Director for West African Buller, and Mr. Tom Gao, Team Leader for One Belt and One Road from Buller. I guess in between their 2 interventions, there will be a short video about Buller's fortified rice blending process, I guess. And Mr. Touzani, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. I will try to share my screen. So today I'm going to give you a brief overview about the technological aspect of the rice fortification. So quickly, I will start with a brief introduction of the Buller Group. So Buller Group is a Swiss company founded 160 years ago. We are recognized as a global leader in food processing. So we are mainly focusing on grain and food, where we process many commodities like wheat, rice, corn, cocoa beans, etc. So for the topic of today, we are interested in the human nutrition aspect, where Buller develops various technologies and processes for the human nutrition commodities, starting by breakfast cereals, pasta, noodles, to alternative proteins. and we have like a particular, let's say, department which is focusing on food ingredients, where we study and develop solutions to fortify foods, especially rice. So for the rice fortification, I mean, I can talk a lot about it, but for the sake of time constraints, I would try to make it brief for the participants. So why do we fortify rice? I mean, the reasons that was mentioned earlier. Rice is like a staple food for more than half of the global population, providing more than 20% of the world's calorie intake. It's widely consumed in developing countries where malnutrition is a big topic. So this gives us like a great opportunity to bring improvement into the nutrition of these people, and also bring many benefits, like reducing the child mortality and reducing the risk of chronic disease later in their lives. The technological challenge here is that we cannot mix rice kernels with some powdery premix of vitamins and minerals. This gives us kind of segregation that would, let's say, influence the overall aspect of the rice in the end. And we have also the fact that the vitamins and minerals are easily lost during the washing and the storage and the cooking process. So this is why Euler came a couple of years ago, by the way, with like an extrusion process which would allow to embed the additives of vitamins and minerals in kind of fortified kernels of reconstituted rice that we will mix later on with the normal rice that people consume. So with this, we get like very, let's say, highly concentrated kernels of vitamins and minerals, which might look either like the normal rice, or it can take also a kind of special color if this is required by the customer. In terms of the process, this is like an overview about how we can do it. So we have the rice milling process, where we bring the paddy rice from the farm and process it in a rice mill and produce like what we know all as the white rice that people will consume. So as a byproduct of this rice milling, we have the broken kernels that we will grind and reduce into rice flour that we will mix later with the required ingredients and run through an extrusion process to produce these highly concentrated reconstituted rice kernels. After that, we have a process to admix the new reconstituted kernels to the white rice that was produced initially, of course respecting a certain ratio that would like vary from 0.5% to 2%, depend on the application. In terms of technology, it's not that complicated. So we're not talking about like a complete rice processing plant, but rather about some equipment that we will use to grind rice, mix and extrude. I've got here a movie that would give you a quick overview about the extrusion process. Try to run it directly from here. So this shows our installation in China. So this is the extrusion machine, which is the main machine here. So the idea here is to apply high conditions of temperature and pressure to make the vitamins and the minerals very stable within the kernel. And after that, going through, I mean, here you see how we extrude and cut the kernels, the fortified kernels, that would look like and taste like the normal rice. And as I mentioned earlier, we have also the option to, let's say, add another color if there is a need, as you see here in the orange color, if there is a need to, let's say, distinguish these fortified kernels within the white rice. So this is it from my part. I will hand out the presentation also to my colleague Tom, who will give us an overview about what we do in China. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not really sure whether you see my desktop. Okay.
Let's go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. Please allow. Thanks very much for my colleague Majid, and please allow me to introducing fortification in Bureau China. As you know, Bureau Group is a globally group. We have a huge facilities and factories and organization in China. We supply the different kinds of machine, including the machine Majid showed to globally. Sorry. So we also have a very similar human nutrition organization in Bureau China. It was around 20 people teams. We supply the full solutions and service for the local market and also supporting global market too. We also have an application center in China, same as Switzerland. Our product solutions in human nutrition included ready-to-eat, standard ingredients like fortified rice, and also snacks. And here, this is our application center in Bureau China, located in Wuxi. Our application center is supplied product process development, training courses, plant process optimizations. Wuxi is also our headquarters of Bureau China and Bureau Asia. So welcome to Wuxi. And this is a very unique factory in Bureau world. This is Bureau Food Wuxi. It's the only one real food production factory in Bureau world. It supplied the breakfast cereals, fortified rice, insistent rice. It was established in 2007. We have 2 lines there and supply 500, 600 kg per hour products. During that time, roughly the investment around $5 million. I think right now, because of the raw material increasing cost, I think it will be around $7 million. We have long cooperation history with WFP since 2011. Every year we supply around 10 to 20 metric forty rice to WFP. The major countries is coming from Asia, like Mr. Benjamin mentioned, and Cambodia, Sri Lanka, East Timor. Since 2018, we believe One by One Road initiative of China is a great opportunity to develop our global market and strengthen our region's cooperation and the most efficiency of our resources. We're working with our partners right now, not limited to China, but also Europe. We each supply the total solutions for our customer. Our service is somehow like one-stop service, is including finance. It brings the investors, EPC companies, technology service, trading, product development, and also marketing development too. You found us, you found a solution. So currently what we are doing in Africa, we are cooperating with Ghana Cocoa Board. We signed our cooperation MOU in our Abidjan office in July. We would like to support Ghana to build their own cocoa processing industry, keep the value in the region. Of course, we are working with African Union too. We are preparing the number 3 post-harvest congress in this month. We also would like to support our local continent, build the food security systems, stimulate the hunger, and also develop our local own agricultural systems. We meet cell phone and African friends several years. I think it's the right time now to cooperate for the fortified rice system for Ivory Coast. And my name is Tom Gao, 1x1 Road Manager of Building East Africa. I'm based in Dubai. Here below is my colleague Majid and mine's contact information. And any detailed information and question, please contact with us. And also welcome you to visit our Abidjan office and local application center in Abidjan. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gao and Majid. We appreciate the excellent presentation by both of you. Just one question: are we going to have the video play, or we skip the video?
Yeah, actually, I played a quick video during my presentation.
All right,
It was a silent one. Yeah. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Now we come to the Q&A session. For the sake of time, I'm going to gather 3 questions from the floor, from the chat box exactly, to share with our 3 representatives. Actually, one question will be going to be Bueller for you both. And my first question from the floor, we gather that is for Mr. Kabula. Mr. Kabula, since Africa has already imported rice from other countries and places, could these imported rice be fortified in Africa? If so, is there any consequence on the quality during the transportation, the maritime transportation? Mr. Kabula, the question is for you. Please.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. Can imported rice be fortified? I think the simple answer is yes, it can. So the question is not whether or not imported rice can be fortified. The question is whether there is an enabling policy environment in the specific countries that require that imported rice is fortified. At present, an importer could, for example, decide to import fortified rice. But if we want to use fortified rice as a health strategy, then it's down to the governments to ensure that there is standards in place, there is micronutrients that have been prioritized. If they want to put legislation that is in place, then that's going to make sure that those that are importing are only importing what the government has specified. At present, it's open season. You can do, what you want. So the simple answer is yes. So the second part of the question is, what about the quality? Again, when you have standards in place, you specify what's required, and regulators from time to time, sample and test imported products to make sure that they meet and they comply with national standards. So that could be treated just like any other imported food that needs to meet the national standards, and the suppliers and importers should be aware and comply to those standards. So, the simple answer to both of those questions is yes. Can it be fortified? Yes, it can. Can it be able to meet standards? Yes, it can as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kabula, for your insightful answer. My next question gathered from the floor is for Dr. Korean. Dr. Korean, thank you so much for the insightful presentation on rice fortification. We would like to know if there is any analysis on the local brown or bran rice and how that compares with fortified rice. Dr. Korean.
Thank you for the question. I actually just wrote to the chat box to provide a reference that the participant can review if they're interested. I don't know of any studies that look at the local brown rice, but if you look at, generally speaking, yes, of course, brown and parboiled rice are more nutritious than the milled white rice. There are certain micronutrients that you'll find in higher concentrations there, but even even that composition of rice is, that type of rice is not nearly as nutritious as the fortified rice. It's fortified with multiple micronutrients. So of course we can always look to fortify even the brown rice and make it more nutritious. We can fortify biofortified rice, for example, to include other micronutrients. There are always ways to combine this technology to make something even more nutritious, but I don't know of any studies specific to local brown rice.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Thank you for the answer. And I think there could be some more technical inquiry raised by our colleagues from Africa and other countries on this fortified rice, especially with regard to technologies and processing process. Thank you. Next question will go to Biller colleagues. And the question for you both would be, can the rice importing countries fortified rice? If yes, do you think that developing countries have the necessary resources to do so? And how much of China's rice does Biller fortify their market share? Over to you, Mr. Gao and Mazid.
Tom, I will let you go ahead.
I think I can answer the second one. The first one, can you?
Okay. I mean, the first question, the first part of the question was whether the African countries can fortify rice in-house. Okay. I mean, technologically, it's possible, you know, because we have seen many, let's say, African countries, especially in West Africa, going through like rice processing to produce the normal white rice. The challenge that we would have to tackle is the quantity that we would require of broken kernel, broken rice that we would have to, let's say, grind in order to produce this this fortified rice. I think it's totally possible as long as we have enough broken kernels to use into producing this kernels, fortified kernels. And I know that, for example, in Ivory Coast, we have a couple of rice mills that are running, and the broken kernels are kind of byproduct that are like sold with less value, I would say. It's of course used for some traditional dishes, but we can always take these broken kernels and transform them into fortified kernels.
Thank you, Majid. Before we give floor to Tom Gao for his question about China's market share, and there is another question associated to this fortified rice and specifically to shelf life of kernels. The question was what the shelf life of the kernels would be and how the shelf life of fortified rice counted. Thank you, Majid.
Okay, we've got with us also the Dr. Schell from Switzerland joining us. So maybe I will give him the floor to answer this question in order to allow him to participate.
Yes, if you like.
Yes.
Please, Dr. Schell.
Yeah, hello to everybody. So let's say for the drying step and the shelf life, the most important thing is the moisture content of the extruded rice kernels. And here we are recommending a moisture content of the rice kernels around 12 to 13%. So therefore, based on this, we have also from the microbiological point of view, a quite stable view. And then, of course, it's quite important to choose the right package to put in the rice kernels, because when we are fortifying with some vitamins, they are normally temperature sensitive, and also they are not like to the UV light from direct sunlight. And therefore, when the package is right, also we need to exclude oxygen. Then you can say you have a quite stable product. Of course, I cannot give now specific numbers, how long you will take, but at least longer than 6 months, up to 1 year should be possible. Also, it could be depending on the used rice, because sometimes it could also have the raw material itself, how they are produced at the very beginning. If there are some defects, have of course a negative impact on the shelf life. Everything clear?
Thank you, Dr. Xiu. Though
welcome.
there is still one question left for Tom Gao. The question: how much of the China's rice does Bühler Fortified market share? Thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah. As I understand it, we are talking about the fortified rice market. Basically, as I know, is from our Bühler Food Wuxi factory side. So we are major to supplying the Asia countries. Like Mr. Yamin mentioned, right now globally we have major 2 markets. One is in Asia, one is in North America. Actually, we didn't really supply to North America. Major all our capacity is supplied to the Asia side. So that's the current situation right now. And actually for the fortified rice situation, like Papua New Guinea, or for example, they have the government make a law. Is if you wanted to sell the rice in the market, you must mix it with the fortified rice. So this is a very good example when our countries in Africa really thinking fortified rice is very good for the people's nutrition. I think somehow this is a very good example. Because the commercial way sometimes it not really help. And this is more from the government law side. So far, this is information I understand. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gao. I think your answer complies with what Mr. Panjani firstly mentioned in his presentation. Policy and enabling environment would be the first step for upscaling fortified rice, either in Africa or in Asia. And this is exactly what WP has been flagged our support and country operation in the field to support government and business side for fortified rice promotion. Colleagues and experts, I think for the interest of time, we wouldn't take any further questions from the floor, but noted that all the questions coming from our participants in the webinar today will be shared further with all experts and colleagues. Maybe you could spend some more time, review the questions and answer the relevant points if they're so important and so much concerned for fortified rice. We thank you so much for all the speakers' contribution from Mr. Panjani, Dr. Korean, Mr. Tom Gao, and Majid, and Dr. Xiu's contribution to answering the questions. We thank you for this opportunity to share with us a broader view of upscaling and promotion fortified rice initiative across the world. I think there is a long way to go for us, not only in terms of development of technical guidance, handbooks, but also many other dimensions on fortified rice, technically or financially, could be taken into consideration for us to achieve zero hunger in Africa and beyond. Last but not least, let me take this opportunity to personally thank my colleagues in Abidjan, the colleagues from SUR inviting me and allowing me to have this opportunity to facilitate this session. Thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Christiane and Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yan, for this session. I think this was also a very enriching session with rich and diverse experience shared by the various presenters. Thank you very much to all of you.